Just like the original table, this project starts with some rough old reclaimed timber from my timber stack. These are Oregon or Douglas fir beams that will be ripped down to get pieces about 40mm by 50mm. I was able to get all the pieces I needed from 2 of these beams. I started by flattening one face of each beam on the jointer, and this one was the longest at about 2.1 meters or 7 feet long, and only just fit in the space between the jointer cutter head and the wall of the shop. I then put that flat side against the fence and milled the adjacent side flat and square. With those flat reference surfaces, I could now start ripping the beams down to size on the table saw. I first ripped them in half with 2 passes over the blade. I then ripped those pieces in half again to give me 4 lengths out of each beam. Next process was to finish milling each length flat and square all round by running them through the thicknesser. I checked the grain direction on each piece and marked them with an arrow to make sure I was planing with the grain. And these are all the lengths I ended up with. More than I needed, so I could pick out the best ones. Once I had the best pieces chosen, I cut off any rough ends and then cross-cut them closer to final length. With the table being 3.2 meters long, I had to join a few pieces together for the 2 side borders. The longer lengths were cut in half and joined to a 3rd piece so the joints were symmetrical. I put a post on my Instagram about how I was going to do that. So the plan is I'm going to join those 2 together, and this one's going to join there, so that's one massive long piece. But to do that, I need to do a bit of board stretcher magic, and I'm going to do that with a combination of pocket holes and dowels. Using one of my all-time favourite tools, the Dowmax doweling jig, I drilled 2 holes in the ends of each board towards the outside, leaving room in the centre for a single pocket hole. I chose to do it this way so there was no chance of any misalignment when joining the boards together end to end. The pocket hole screw will provide the clamping force to hold the ends together while the glue sets. A quick test fit. Perfect every time. I glued the pieces together using my workbench as a flat reference surface and a makeshift straight edge to keep everything in place while I screwed them together. Nice. It was time to move to the table itself, and the first job was to trim off the rounded edges of the table so I had a flat square edge to fix the border to. This was also a good time to address some weather damage on one end of the table. I used my track saw to trim off both sides and both ends, and I had to do the sides in 3 sections. Then, using my Kreg K4, I drilled pocket holes all the way around the underside of the table so I could screw the border to the table without the need to clamp it in place, which would have been very difficult. Finally, it was time to glue and screw these super long one-piece borders onto the table. But I wasn't stressed. I had everything planned out and in place. Truth is, the glue up went pretty smoothly. Preparation and planning. I used a temporary support at each end of the table to hold the border in place. And then used a flat solid piece of timber clamped to the top surface of the table to ensure that the edge border would be fixed in place flush with the table surface. I then repeated this step at every screw location until the job was done. With the table flipped over the right way, I cleaned up the dried glue and then started the long process of sanding the entire tabletop, ensuring a smooth joint between the border and the table and sanding the old finish ready for a new one. There was a lot of sanding. I started with 60 grit and stepped through to 80, 120 and then 180. I won't show you all of that. The finish for the table was Cabot's CFP Floor in matte. It's a water-based poly that's very hard wearing and actually dries dry. It's never tacky like other polys can be. And as usual, I applied the finish with my trusty Wagner sprayer. Wow, that's a long table when I see it from this perspective. Time to work on the base. When I originally built it, I didn't glue the stretcher in place or these plugs because I thought if I ever needed to move the table, I could pull it apart. But I've changed my mind on that and the base has loosened up over time, so I'm going to add glue to that joint. The hot glue trick worked to get the plugs out and then I could remove the threaded rods that held the joint together. I trimmed down the top of the legs because I didn't like that shape anymore. It's interesting how your design taste can change over time. I also addressed some water discoloration on the bottom of the legs by trimming them down a little as well. Time to reassemble the base, so as I mentioned, I glued the stretcher in place this time and then reinstalled the threaded rods. Oregon is a softwood, so to protect the feet from water damage, I added these blocks of hardwood. I wanted these to be easily replaceable in the future, so my idea was to install them with 2 aluminium dowels and just held in place with silicone sealant and the weight of the table. The dowels are there to stop the feet being dislodged if the table is moved. That's the upgrade finished and I'm very happy with it. I like how the edge border gives the impression of the tabletop being much thicker and it gives it a more finished look overall. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you next time.